All right, welcome. Let's call to order our July 7th meeting of the Community Preservation Committee. Our first order of business is it's the beginning of a new fiscal year, and we need to reorganize ourselves. Excuse me. So being as such, as typically we call for nominations for each of the chair, the vice chair, and the clerk. Yes.
I nominate Deborah Mooney to continue as chair.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. That was fast.
Yep.
As I am currently the chair, I should not manage the vote on the next chair, and our vice chair is no longer with us. So would the clerk please take over the vote for chair?
All right. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none. Do I hear a motion to take a vote on this?
I make a motion that we vote on the next chairperson.
Second.
All right. Well, shall I go around the room? Kathy? Wait a minute. Let's see. How do I phrase it?
All those in favor?
Pardon me?
Just say all those in
If
favor.
we're all here, I don't think you have to do an individual
Okay.
Roll call.
survey.
Yeah.
How
All in
many
favor,
of us
yeah.
are in favor of Deb Mooney continuing as chair?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Yay.
You're supposed to then do oppose.
Oh, anybody opposed? No.
My husband's at home jumping up and down. Thank you.
All right. Do you feel that you're going to carry on?
I
as
can
vice-
carry on now.
Okay. All right.
And the next office is vice chair. I would actually like to nominate Kathy McSweeney to serve as our vice chair for the next year. I think she would do a tremendous job. Are there any other nominations for vice chair?
Or should we second that?
Do you I would second that, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then all in favor of Kathy McSweeney as the vice chair for the coming year, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Congratulations, you are our
Thank you.
vice chair.
All right.
And for the role of clerk,
Thank
she
you.
does a stellar job. I'd like to nominate Melanie McGee to continue as clerk for another year. Are there any other nominations?
Second.
All right. So all in favor of Melanie McGee as serving as clerk for the next year, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We're all here, we're not abstaining, so congratulations, you'll continue as clerk. That was a speedy and orderly reorganization.
Okay.
So moving on, thank you all. Review and approve minutes from our last meeting. Are there any edits or changes or clarifications needed for the minutes from the June meeting? And is there a motion to approve the minutes from our June meeting?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have approved.
I'm
our-
abstaining as I was not here.
Okay, so our minutes from June are approved. So next is review and sign bills. Emma, do we have any bills?
We do not have any this month.
Great.
I believe we'll have one next month because the coalition sent their bill today.
Yes, yes. that
We're
would
not
be
paying
on-
bills today.
Let 'em wait.
Save that for August.
All right. Then, actually, I should mention, I don't know if you've all met Griffin O'Neill, who's also an assistant planner, is joining us. Emma and Griffin are going to staff us most of the time when we need big expertise that you have, I'm sure. Chris will also join us, but more often than not, it will be Emma and Griffin going forward. So, do you have a staff report a department report for us?
We actually have nothing to report this month.
We're gonna be fast.
Whoa.
Did you want to talk about the website or save that for
Yes.
Chris?
So I will at least talk about the part of the website that I've kind of redesigned for us. So I'll share my screen so you can take a look. But there's a new community preservation projects page. So there's like new stickers for all of the projects, and then you'll also see them listed over here. So when you click on it, You'll see a summary of the project, and then you'll also be able to access the application materials and supporting documents. And as project updates come in, we'll also be adding updates to the pages as
Looks
well.
good.
Can you click on the application page so we can see what it looks like? The application link?
Sure, yeah. So it should, if it works correctly, yeah, take you right to like the PDF of, oh, I realize I'm sharing the wrong screen, hold on. Okay, so yeah, it will take you right to a PDF of the application.
And as you complete, if I may, as you complete that, are you able to save the document, or every time you get out of your computer, do you have to go and start over? I'm speaking from personal experience. It's very arduous to try to complete this application in the format it was before, so I'm hoping it's better now.
So we'll be talking about the application process a little later in the meeting. And we'll be highlighting the transition we hope to do over to the online applications. And those will be saved.
Okay, I've
can
completed those
save-
as well. I was your guinea pig for that.
Yes,
Um,
so you can save that as you go along and then go back to it. I'm not sure for like the paper version or online paper version of the eligibility application. I think that just depends on how you, like what software you fill it out
I
with.
suspect if it's a fillable PDF, if we were to instruct people to download it, they can complete it and save it on their own desktop and then upload it. But that instruction needs to be there, because I know that
and
I've,
specific instructions, because that's not how it works, at least for me. I'm sure someone who's
I'm
much
not
more
sure
tech-savvy,
if it
it's-
would work with that, but I know that was a workaround I found when I found similar applications that were frustrating.
I mean,
John?
my impression is, once you get out of it, my concern, you just use the word upload. It doesn't just happen automatically. There has to be a link to get them back in there. So, I mean, the point is, she sounds like she's gonna take a look at it to make sure it works.
Yeah, I can take a look and add instructions as we turn over to the online application. There'll be an application section on the website as well that will walk you through how to fill out the application. So I can take a look and I can add instructions in there about best practices for filling out this version of the application.
I know what I've voiced my opinion, what we have met, if we're going to the same platform that is used for every other transaction in town hall, we have to continue to have this as an option.
Yes.
Because most people are, it's not a user-friendly system. It's user-friendly for plumbers and builders who use that system all the time. I mean, it's the same system to buy your composting bucket, and that was ridiculous. I can't really think of a better way. What plot of land am I making this request from?
Right.
But it pre-populated because I have pulled a building permit before. And that seemed a bit absurd to buy a composting bucket that I don't even know how big it is. It doesn't say. Like, they could have put a hand or something, but I'm like, I'll buy it. But
A further comment on our applications, they're very redundant, because you fill out almost the same information on the application as you do on the funding request. So there should be a way that I've filled it out for eligibility, I shouldn't have to repeat or no one should have to repeat themselves and retype the address and the name of there should just be a way you can add that to the end of the document and then have it work. And I think, but for me, every time I've completed one, I've done both at the same time because I have all the information, so then it just appears super redundant. I think if you're doing one months apart, but I think most people do them pretty close together.
we're hoping to discourage that going forward. I think it'd be better if if we simplify, we'll get into it more of the applicant, but if we can simplify the eligibility part.
Eligibility
Make
has
it
a place
easy.
to put the budget, so you can't technically
can
fill it out
strike
unless you
that.
have the budget, and then when you have the budget, you might as well fill the
Right.
whole
Well,
thing
that's
out.
one of the suggestions, is to strike that, just simplify it, that just what do you want to, is it eligible? How is it eligible? What do you want to do? Why do you want to do this? What does it do for the town?
Right.
and leave it really simple so that it's quick and easy, and hopefully we'll encourage more people to have an idea and just see would it stick,
That
would
would
it
be
fly
ideal.
before they go to the trouble.
Yeah.
But they can cut and paste. I don't know
Not in this
if we have to
application.
use PDFs. I don't know of a way that you could pre-populate the PDF.
And the questions are just different enough that you just can't even cut and paste.
Could it be a second page, like combine the two together, but really the eligibility is the first part with the address, and then the next part is like not to be filled out until you've been approved for eligibility, unless you wish to proceed.
I don't think people will read the instructions, so I think
Yes.
they should be
Yeah.
too clearly
I
different
think, yeah,
things.
Yeah.
But, I mean, 'cause I know I'm drawing on my experience filling out foundation grants, and they come in every shape, and some of them are nightmares. So we certainly want to avoid any more nightmares. We've had some starts and stops with this, but we'll get to that and finish the part about showing us what's on the website. So we
Sorry.
can see what people have
Yeah, that's-
completed. That takes us to that.
Yeah, so you'll be able to see all that info on here. For anyone else is curious, they can see all of the application documents and supporting documents. And like I mentioned, the updates will also, as they come in, be put on these web pages. Yeah, that was it. Are there any other questions about those web pages?
Should it say approved or should it say approved and funded? Because there's a difference. We recommend, but it's town meeting that funds it. Should it,
So, yeah, maybe 3 different words like eligible, yes. And
well,
then-
I'm talking about what's on, when we see the things that are completed,
Right.
that have gone through the whole town meeting process. There was a heading, if you go back, I think a couple of screens, Emma, it said approved projects or approved and in process. I'm wondering, so
Yes.
approved projects in process, approved and funded, or is approved in process enough to know that obviously
that
it
the
got
same
approved by
thing?
town meeting?
So, when these are all obviously have been approved by town meeting, which is why they're here. But there's going to be a different section of projects for projects that haven't been approved yet. So it will either say, eligible projects awaiting funding vote, something like that.
Or
I don't know the
pending.
exact verbiage, but
Pending town meeting action or something.
exactly, yeah. So there'll be an entirely different section for those projects as they come in.
Probably when they're both there, we can figure out that it's crystal clear which is which. Are there any questions or comments about what's going on with the website right now? All right. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we move on to the community preservation plan updates and goals?
Now we can get right into the update.
Alrighty. Thank you all for submitting edits and updates. I realized I didn't do the letter. Oops.
Oh, got a new cover.
Yeah, like the fire truck.
Yeah. It's very appealing. The collage of photographs is very, very appealing. Great colors.
And I will add that all of the edits that we had talked about during our June meeting were added in to this plan, so it reflects everything that we had talked about at the previous meeting.
So are there any other last minute changes, comments, or edits, or are we ready to approve this for the coming year?
Motion to approve.
Yeah, I think it looks good.
Yep, I liked it.
I'll second
Really
it.
nice. So is there a motion to approve and adopt our annual community preservation plan?
Motion to approve.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have a new community preservation plan for the coming year. Thank you. So we were going to talk about reviewing and adopting proposed changes to the application process. I would like maybe us to consider not voting on the final application because edits you won't see tonight because I didn't give them to you in time. And also we will have at least one new member, maybe more. I'd love for them to take a look at it before we vote on the final application to get their thoughts. The more we can get, like Kathy, having used it, has great insight. We had discussed going back to a more general deadline, not having, well, we will always accept an eligibility application, and if there's anything timely, we will do it as fast as we can. I think having deadlines again related to, we now know we're always going to have a special town meeting in the fall. We know when annual May town meeting is. To have things around that, I know that I felt nervous last fall approving things, recommending things and hoping that we still had enough money come May. But if we have deadlines, maybe we can not budget, probably budget, but be thoughtful about what we have and knowing that by a certain date we've had all we probably will. What do you folks think about that? What else can we do to make the process easier, better?
I'm assuming that these guidelines that were on our drive, is that will be available to the public, correct? I mean, this is what, if you go to the website, you'll see this. I think it's very well done, and it explains the process very clearly. I mean, it's what's expected, and so I'm happy with that. And I think I agree with Deborah as far as our scheduling of.
Miss Kathy?
I'm opposed to having deadlines, and the reason I'm opposed to having deadlines, because our first year, the town came in with a project that appeared to defy all deadlines. And then apparently there was somewhere in this that you can just do whatever you want. So it made it look like there were different rules for the town than there was for everyone else who was reading it. I do see the value in us knowing all the projects before us so that we can make sure we have the money. So I think what I'd rather see is a rolling admission so that people can submit whatever they want, but we may make our final decisions and perhaps have our, our public meetings before the next town meeting. So if town meeting's in May, then we would need to do that by February or March. So they can submit any time, which gives us time to review and have people in and get discussions and further meetings, and then maybe make a decision. But I don't like the idea of a deadline, unless we're sticking with it. Either we have a deadline or we don't. We can't have a deadline and then say, oh, but sure, go ahead, you're special. And that's what I feel like we did our first year.
And from the very first year, there was, maybe it wasn't worded strong enough, but there was always an exclusion for something timely, important, urgent.
We decided the town had something timely, urgent, and important, but we would make that same concession to an individual that came, and I don't know that we would. And that's why it feels wrong to have a deadline if we're not going to enforce it. Either we have one or we don't, which is why I like the idea of flexibility, but get that it's hard to make the funding decisions when we don't have a total, like a big picture of what all the requests are. So I'd like to see a combination of those two things would be my preference, but I'm just one person.
I like eligibility anytime you want.
Yep.
We won't necessarily, so at least people have time. If somebody's got an idea, come to us right away. We can determine eligibility fast, but
Right.
when we stay on track, which we're
Right.
getting better at.
Yeah.
I guess that's the way I feel.
Yeah.
I have no knowledge of people telling me this, but my belief is people don't apply because they think they've missed the, they're not even sure of the deadlines and everything. Whereas if I can do something this week, and, it gets approved in a month, and then I can work on it for 2 or 3 months, as opposed to having a hard deadline, I gotta do it within a certain amount of time. So I think that has a tendency to turn people off. This way, if it doesn't get on till the town meeting in 2027, they can work at it at their pace. If it's not urgent, like we gotta buy the land tomorrow or else, that type of thing. But, if they want something like the fellow that talked about doing the parking at the camp or the conservation land off of Gulf Street, that doesn't have to be done in a timeline. We don't have to get it done by the fall or the spring. We can get it done whenever we want, theoretically. So, if he wanted to work on that, then he could do it at his leisure, let's say. I'm just using that as an example. But I think if we leave the timeline out, I think if we put in the process that, here are the steps. You make the application, it gets approved. We look at the funding, we submit the request for funding. That gets approved, then it goes to the town meeting.
What if we have a stronger message about submit an eligibility request at any time?
Yeah.
Submit that at any time in order to have the possibility of being considered at the next town meeting. It's got to be received, unless
Yes.
extraordinary circumstances intervene, it must be received
Like-
60 days before the next town
Town
meeting.
meeting, yes.
Except that, only so that we have time to legally advertise a public hearing,
See,
have time to vet it.
As opposed to putting it in say, February or April, March for the May town meeting, which would be 60 days. I don't think we want to put a hard March date on it. Just say 60 days before a town meeting,
Eh.
because theoretically, we never know when we're going to have town
What do you think
meetings.
if we were to guarantee that it will be considered before,
No
for the
guarantee.
next town meeting, or to have a higher likelihood or something? Because if they give it to us 60 days in advance and we don't get it done, that's on us. They give it to us, actually, we only have 2 months before we have to have it to the select board to be considered for the warrant and go through finance committee, so we even need it earlier than that.
I think
2 months.
eligibility, if we take the money out of it, people
Yep.
can do eligibility
I
anytime.
agree.
And then say, okay, it's deemed eligible by this body. So the next town meeting is scheduled for whatever date, so we would need to have the rest of your documents if you want to be considered by this date. And then it would change twice a year, because we'd have different dates twice a year. Or fall, we don't really even know when our meeting is till
Right, so are we talking about the fall or the spring town meeting or both?
both.
So
Yeah, okay.
what I will also say is in the plan that we just voted on, there was proposed deadlines for the spring and fall town meeting, so 2 separate sets of deadlines. And then our recommendation as a department is that you decide as a committee what the threshold for accepting applications past that deadline are. So to your point, Kathy, like instead of just accepting it without it meeting some threshold, you can decide if it should be a simple majority vote from the committee, a 2/3, or unanimous. And that can be the threshold that a project has to meet after a deadline to be considered for the town meeting that's next.
And I don't even think we should suggest, let's use the May town meeting again. Somebody comes to us with a project, and we decide there's not enough money in the particular account. In my mind, I think we should still go ahead and approve. If we think it's a good project, we should approve it. Once it's approved, then does that just push it into the next year when more money becomes available? As opposed to saying, oh, we can't approve this because we don't have enough money. And then does that, if we did that, does that start the clock all? Do they have to reapply, blah, 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 blah,
I
blah?
don't think we'd have to make anyone reapply. My question is, I know we cannot approve multi-year funding, but can we recommend a project for the next fiscal year? Or would we,
Why?
I think we have to check with the coalition. I don't
know
think
that
we
you
can
can,
for the next
because,
fiscal
right.
year.
Yeah.
But we could
Would-
hold hold something.
Who do we have
or
to check?
discuss with the applicant and hold it.
Coalition, I don't think you can approve
Well, yeah, I
for
think you
funds that you
can.
don't
I
have.
think it's, once it's eligible, for example, the Housing Authority request came in after the town meeting. So that was deemed eligible for the next town meeting,
Right.
which would be in
Yes,
November.
but not, you can't,
But that
you
doesn't
can't
matter.
fund,
Right, you can't fund it, but
Right,
you could deem it eligible, and
Right,
then,
sure,
and the funding thing would be submitted, and whenever that comes up, it's
Right.
funded.
We can't promise, we can't ask town meeting to approve it for later, but
Right.
we can say it's good to go.
It's eligible, so
Right.
but not,
it's up to
Yeah.
them, then they can raise
but
money.
it's
That's
too
kinda
late
what
for
I
this
meant.
town
I
meeting, so submit for the next.
We can, I don't see why we can't approve the project, and then, even if I approve something now, yeah, we sit on it till next year, and then it goes to the town meeting next year, when the funds become available.
I
Why
don't think,
can't
I don't think you can
No.
do that, because you don't know what your funds are gonna be.
I think we can just deem it eligible, but we
Eligible.
can't fund, we can't vote to fund
I
it.
think you're right.
We
Right.
can vote, we can deem it eligible, but we can't vote to fund it
Okay.
next year.
Can ask the coalition for a clarification,
So-
Well,
for sure, but I
I'll say
think.
the downside to that is if we're approving X amount of funds, somebody goes out and gets a quote, and if we push it back a year, that quote may not be any good anyway. So, I was just being theoretical about
We can't,
trying to
we
get,
can't encumber funds that aren't part of the budget that we are working with.
no, we can't. Funds don't get encumbered until the town votes them anyway. But again, I just thought if we said, we want to spend $50,000 here, and it just rolls forward until either funds are available or the town approves it. Basically, I'm looking at it from a standpoint of trying to get people to feel better about making applications.
Yeah, except that's almost like a promissory note, that what if we can't meet that note? If we're promising them $50,000 in the future, well, what if we don't have that $50,000?
We know funds are coming every year.
Well, do it?
we
I mean, you
don't.
never
Well,
know.
every year taxes are
I
collected
don't
and we
believe
get our.
we can,
You get
I
$1
don't
million
believe we
from
can
the
go that
tax
far in
base.
advance
Yeah, I
with the
think so.
funding
Anyway,
Yeah.
approval. We can hold on to it, we can say it's eligible, we can get feedback and tell them that we love it, but I don't believe we can't vote for it to go to the next town meeting. We can vote for it the next town meeting, but we can't vote for it for the one after that, hoping we have money.
But they can resubmit. And the other thing is that perhaps during that time, they can get funding somewhere else to make it more possible that
Right.
CPC could help.
Right,
We're also not taking into account the fact that the price of the project could increase as time passes, which is
Yeah.
all too common.
it is, unfortunately.
I think more people will, may apply for things if they don't have to go through the whole funding process for the eligibility. If it's just eligible,
I think
I
we
think that's-
simplify the
yeah, I think
eligibility
that's a
application,
great
take
step.
off funding. If somebody wanted to share that in their narrative, that's up to them. But absolutely, we don't want them to have to go get a whole design, build, budget, and estimates just to find out that we're sorry, we don't build that,
Right.
we don't build windmills. No, we don't want them to go to that length. We want them to say, I've got an idea, it's on town land and the town's okay with it. We want them to find that out before they come to us. But we want people to come to us with their ideas and we'll try to help. I think history has shown that we try like heck to help them make it eligible when we can. So we'll simplify the eligibility application. Is there anything else that you think should come off it? We'll take off everything about the budget. I think it's worth adding on it, this is step one, to be completed before proceeding with funding request. And we can simplify the questions a little bit, we've got a brief description of your project, what community needs for your project to address, who will benefit from your project, who are your partners, who is committed to being a part of this project, and who would you like to have at the table. We can also maybe simplify, we ask an anticipated timeline. I don't think we need reference to benchmarks such as design, permitting, construction, et cetera. What we could ask is how close would you be with funding to getting started? Because we also don't necessarily want, if somebody is asking for some, I mean, we'll find that out, and we don't need to know that in the eligibility stage. We can find that out when we get to the full funding, because then we'll want to know.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to give them money and find out they're not breaking ground for 3 years. But we could get rid of that question, I think.
And I'll also just add that the department recommendation is also to eliminate the budget section of the eligibility application and replace it with a scope of work question. So instead of asking for a specific budget, that might involve getting, a quote or an estimate, which takes a long time. Instead, asking for a project cost range that an
Same thing.
applicant.
You still have to go, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's just the suggestion that we had, just so when you're voting, you have an idea of.
I mean, a compromise of the two, I mean, how much it costs that is not germane to whether or not it's eligible. I know we get caught up in the details because we want to know everything, but that's not germane to whether or not it's eligible. It's eligible if it fits, checks one of the boxes. It's eligible if it's town land and the town knows you want to do it and they're okay with it. And it's eligible if it's legal. And so let's simplify that. Emma and I have written on this, and I can give it to Emma. We can bring this back to our next meeting for everybody to look at a simpler project eligibility application. So if we simplify it here, then you can simplify what you're putting on that dreaded software program. So if we do that and encourage project eligibility is accepted by the committee at any time. That, please submit whenever you are complete. We will consider at our next meeting, if somebody completes it and it's at least a week in advance, we can be on the agenda. We'll consider it at our meeting. There's no reason not to put them on. Or could we even circumvent that by having an agenda item that is just like our bills, review, discuss and approve any eligibility requests. And then if literally we got it the day before, technically we don't need a public hearing to decide whether or not it's eligible. Do you think that would make it a little bit more user-friendly too? If we'll take it any time, and as soon as it's submitted at our next meeting, we will.
Yeah, I mean,
Review.
if they submit it at the last minute, we can be like the planning board, move it to the next meeting,
Yeah.
we can take a look at it. If it's simple, we could say yes. If it's a little bit more complex, we can move it to again, that's why it's good not to have a timeline to get to the next town meeting. This gives us the ability to push it back to the following month if we still have questions. Yeah, leave it open-ended.
Then our application is longer. Some people like that. They've got a lot to tell us, and others, it's intimidating. So what can we do to make it a little bit more? On the second page of it, under timeline, it says, please share your schedule for this project. I wonder if it might be, say, if known, include all, it currently says include all elements of construction as well as timing of expenditures, receipt of other funding, and expected completion date. Even adding if known before that. We need to know some of that.
But see, again, that's telling them you want the price.
I think eligible should be a one-page form.
No, this is in the funding application. This
Yeah.
is ineligible.
All right.
This is the next step.
So I have a question. I mean, a
didn't
lot of
realize
people
it.
have a really interesting idea, but they don't know exactly what the process would be to complete that. And they don't know how to figure out the costs. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. If they don't know how to figure out the costs of a project, either they should be paired, if it's something to do with town land, they should be paired with a department representative that would guide them through that, or
Someone
do it for them.
Planning or something?
But if it's a standalone project that isn't on the town property, and the person proposing it doesn't know how to get costs, that might not be the right person to be spearheading a project with CPC funds. I think there's a minimal level of maybe not expertise, but willingness to find a partner with the expertise.
And the recommendation we have for all project applicants is to come to the planning department first, so that if there is an instance where an applicant might not be sure how to go through the process, we can connect them with a town department that would.
Could we, when
I
we
still
say
think-
something's eligible,
Yes.
notify them via email and or in writing that, the committee has deemed this eligible, here are your next steps, and put it right there, even though we can also refer them to the document that we work on every year that has those steps, but tell them explicitly what's next
Yeah.
and how to reach you guys to help them through it.
See, I think we're jumping ahead again. You gotta separate eligibility from everything else. Is it eligible or not? End of story. Because
That we
after,
moved on to
We did,
yeah, but you still, we're talking, in my mind, you were still talking about eligibility, and if they don't know how to do costs, they should be talking to people about it. I guess that maybe you confused me, but I thought you were still talking about eligibility.
Now, if we've taken everything about costs off of eligibility, it's only on the funding application.
Okay, you didn't
And-
say that.
And Diane's question was, what on the funding application, if they don't know how to get those costs, what do they do? Kathy?
And also, I know you said, you recommended going to planning board to ask these questions. Perhaps an info sheet could be there for the people that aren't you two, because I drove the last time I submitted this because I was having trouble and I was told, I don't know, because you guys weren't there. So there needs to be instructions there on who to talk to and what to do, rather than telling someone at the counter that they don't know.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
if
who
the
and
point
how-
is to make this accessible to people so that they can come up with great ideas.
But if they drive here, they should get answers to their questions.
Yeah.
So when we've deemed it eligible off of our simplified eligibility application, which we will all look at next month, we'll put it up there. I don't know that we can get it to one page, only because there's property, but it won't be full 2 pages. When we notify someone that we have decided that this concept, this project is eligible, it'll be in writing, and it will tell them your next steps are. And how, actually, depending on the timing, we may know. If you would like it considered at, say they are eligible in January and they'd like it considered at the May town meeting, please try to have this done to us before March. We can tell them why.
Mhm.
But your next steps are to do this. If you need assistance, to contact Emma O'Connor or Griffin O'Neill with your emails. If you guys are willing to give an email, not just planning at, or even a phone number. And that what comes next, where to find more information, who they're looking for, not just a department. Because I know when people go to the window, they don't know the difference between who is the building department, who is focused on permitting, and who are our best friends. So let's make it more personal if we can.
Kevin David.
It's
Yeah,
okay.
I'll cancel it. I forgot to.
It's Publishers Clearinghouse. You've won $1 million.
No, but it's.
Gonna fund all the projects next year.
I forgot the.
So, is there anything besides to put the project eligibility to bed? We want to emphasize and get it out there that we will review them, get them to us at any time, and we'll review them at our next scheduled meeting for eligibility, and we will simplify it and look at it next time and see if we can't make that form a little bit more user-friendly. Looking at the project funding application, what have you folks thought was too much on there and what should be? See, for right now, people can put in as much as they'd like, but it's 2 pages of questions. there is the co-sponsor consent form, which is necessary if, Papa should put a box on it, if it is using town-owned land or town as a co-sponsor. And there's a budget form.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
What is the smallest project that we would take, and at what point would we say, no, that's too small for us? I mean, if somebody wants, say, a park bench, that's pretty small. I don't even know if that would be eligible or legal or whatever, but just something along those lines, you know?
I don't know that we've ever talked about it. I mean, it's a lot to do for $50, but if
Well,
it's
the
something
park
that,
benches are a lot more expensive than that
Yeah.
now, but, yeah.
but if it's something that fits the criteria, I don't know, what do you folks think?
What was the storybook walk, right? What was that,
Yeah.
$16,000? Was that our
Well, it was like,
smallest?
No.
you know, steel posts set in
No, no, I
concrete.
know, but that was a small project.
We've had some
It
around
was.
5 and less,
Yes, that's true, that's true.
some of the studies.
Yes.
Yeah, the ledger restoration wasn't very much money. Um,
You know,
And I'm just wondering if there's some bottom line where we say, no, why don't you, ask somebody else? I don't know.
If it fits the eligibility, what difference does it make what the cost is,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
I mean,
So there's,
If someone wanted to go through the process, if it's $10 and it's not eligible and one of us likes it, maybe we meet them in the parking lot and help fund it later.
Here's your
right there,
$10.
see what I've got in my wallet, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, we don't have a maximum, I don't know that we need to have a minimum. Not
It's just,
yet.
I just wondered about it because, you don't want to be cluttered up with a lot of trivial stuff, but on the other hand, you don't want to rule out things that might be of value cumulatively over time or something, you know?
I think we're still in the point of trying to get more applications.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
probably fewer, just be eligible and be a great, be
yeah.
a good idea. Doesn't even have to be a magnificent idea, a good idea
you know,
that
if it's
fits.
eligible and it serves the betterment of the community, then
Yeah,
why should we not fund it?
Mhm.
be lovely if not everything was terribly expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, say, a new sandbox for one of the parks or something. That can't be too expensive, right?
I don't know, I think our last few, we're working with parks, we've realized how much playground things cost.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, who knows what sand is these days?
So you mentioned things we can get rid of in the funding application. I've just pulled out the last one I completed, and I basically changed the words project description, project purpose, and project goals. Project description was to build more housing in Elizabeth Street. Project purpose is to build more housing. And project goal was to provide more housing. So totally redundant. And then timeline, my timeline was, it'll begin after we get approval, if we get approval. So there's a lot of.
And that's how you have to say it.
I know, but
That's
why ask it if that's, if we can't do anything till timeline? But I just, it's so redundant. I tried
I
to find
think
creative ways
purpose
to
and
say the same
goals
thing
are
over and over.
redundant. I think the description is different. Your description is, we want to build, a certain type of housing unit for someone, and the purpose is to help.
To build
make
more housing, and the goal is to have more housing.
Right, I think purpose and goal are redundant, but I don't think description is redundant.
Okay.
But we could do that.
I mean,
Get rid of goals, make this shorter. Because those are the sorts of things that we can ask with purpose.
yeah, I mean, it's a simple question, what's the project for and what do you expect to accomplish?
And like project, how does it preserve and enhance Shrewsbury? And then the
It's-
project goal is who will benefit from it.
Well, because remember, these were trying to be really generic too. So like you see it through one lens for something with housing. And when we're looking at preserving old documents, it's a different lens. It's hard to have one question for
And
such
maybe
wide-
I just haven't completed it twice.
Yeah.
It's, again, it's not an easy process, and to have to do the same thing twice.
Would
Is
it be helpful to have, a short,
Let's
a
get rid of
short
one.
description or purpose, but then maybe a series of other considerations that we could bring up when they come before us. They don't have to write it all out, but at least they could be prepared to be able to answer other questions that might fall into those categories, you know? I don't know. Like, do they have to write it out, then we read it, or if it doesn't really, if it's not pertinent, but maybe we ask a question and at least they're prepared to be able to answer it.
Is there anything you've wanted to know when we've had our applicants before us that you felt like you didn't know, like, across the board when you read the application? That there was something missing that you didn't know that would have been important?
I think probably the Arrowwood project was the most difficult one because it evolved so much. So there was always a question, you know, okay, what about this, what about this, what about this? I anticipate the same thing's gonna happen with housing, because they're so involved,
Yep.
that there's always gonna be questions, and they can't possibly be answered on an application, because that changes. And actually, with Arrowwood, the whole application changed so many times that, you know, they didn't fill out a whole new application each time. It kind of
Yeah.
evolved in this body. So I don't know that there's any specific question that wasn't answered, but it wasn't necessarily answered on the application form. Once the application form was submitted and it was eligible, I kind of forgot about the application because it was all done,
That's all right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how involved does that application have to be?
I think legally.
How
we
much
need
money
a
is it gonna
pretty
cost?
good
Why do you
paper
wanna
trail
do it?
Before we give away money.
Well, yeah, but how, you know, why do you think this is good for Shrewsbury? Why do you want to do it, and how much is it going to cost? And then
Let's
we'll go from-
delete the goals. Briefly describe your budget. Implementation, one thing, I think the non-town projects has a project manager been identified. I think that could be reworded because some folks may not, that might be intimidating, and also they may not understand that we're just wondering, who's responsible? Who is responsible for getting this done? Where does the buck stop? So we can reword that.
We're spending a lot of time parsing words on this document right now. Do we want to just go back and have everybody put something down as to what they think for the next meeting? We keep talking like this, we'll be here till 8:30 just talking about this document.
It's the ghost of Jason.
Number two, okay, having done some of these things before, here's my belief, we as a committee are too close to the situation. So in our mind, we have 50 playing 20 questions. We want all these 20 questions answered. As opposed to, you know, as she said, when she had to do the document, it seemed redundant, et cetera, et cetera. So somebody that's out there in left field says, geez, I want to try something, and they get this document, and they get bewildered, and they say, forget it, it's too much, you know, as opposed to starting with something simple. I want to put some park benches down in the park at Jordan Pond. Not Jordan Pond. What's the pond?
That's fine.
Down
Doesn't
on
matter.
Old Mill Pond.
Yeah.
You know, there's a little park at the end of
Yeah.
Old Mill.
Rotary Park, yeah.
It'd
Rotary
be nice
Park.
to have some park benches there. Maybe there are, I don't have been in a while.
I think there's one.
But the point is, you know, here's what I want to do. And then, once it gets submitted, probably even before we have a meeting, we could go back, either us or the planning department. You know, can you give us a little bit more information? So, you know,
And ask for the specific information that you're looking for?
well, it depends on what they put down. Maybe they'll put enough information down.
I think
I want to put park benches in Old Mill Pond. Is that enough information? Maybe
for
it
that
is.
project, probably.
Is, you know, for eligibility.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't think of something that they would put down that would say, well, you know, I can't think of what else we would need. But the point is, if somebody wanted to do that, they'd look at these two-page form and say, you know, I don't even know what they're talking about, too many questions, and they just say, forget it, it ain't that big of a deal.
I think we can do more to highlight the directions. Right now, they're buried in the plan. Let's make sure the directions are easy to find. I'm happy to take this and simplify it, but I do think that we have a responsibility. We have to ask some questions. This is a public record. We're putting it online. When people ask about transparency and what this committee is doing, it's not enough that we got all the answers when we asked them. We need to have something that the public can see as well, that this is where we started from, that they asked for this, they got an estimate. It's going to be, we do have to have some sort of estimate when it gets to funding, and we voted on it based on this criteria. That it doesn't sound like we just sat around and talked and handed out money. We have to have something. And to be honest, 2 pages to ask for $600,000, that's not too much to ask. 2 pages for $600,000. But let's emphasize,
But
answer
you didn't know it
what
was
fits your
$600,000
project.
when you were looking for eligibility.
We've moved on to the funding application. We're not talking about eligibility. We already finished that.
It seems like we keep circling back in my mind, but that's okay.
I'm sorry for that. But this was about the project funding application. That we need more meat. At project eligibility, all we're going to ask is have them check the boxes if it fits with that table, and tell us a little bit about what you want to do. And if it's on town land, let us know if you've talked to the town. That's it. That's all we need to know.
Okay.
And if we're missing something from that brief description, we'll ask before we consider it. We can look at it and say, we don't have enough information. Can you answer A, B, and C as far as eligibility goes? That's all we need to ask for eligibility. So why don't we work on, we'll edit the documents and we'll make sure you have them in advance the next meeting, and we can look at them then. So let's move on to our next topic, which was looking at the CPC Affordable Housing Trust Joint Committee, the proposed funding agreement. That is in the drive as well. Kathy, you were on that committee. Do you want to talk to this, or Emma?
I don't, Kathy, if you want to, you can go ahead.
I'll start, and then
Okay.
why don't you jump in?
Perfect.
So some of us may remember our first year, we received a request from the Affordable Housing Trust to, an eligibility, and I don't know if it was just eligibility or funding, requesting monies be transferred from CPC into their account so that they would be able to be a little bit more liquid and to move a little faster. And I was vehemently opposed. Having worked with, so since then, a subcommittee was formed. Jason and I represented the Community Preservation Act. I feel like I still had my Housing Authority hat on there, along with Marty Gannon and Hector from Affordable Housing Trust. We met several times with Planning Board and came to an agreement that I feel works well together. I'm very comfortable with it, having worked on it. And also, I will say, I think one of the things I was so opposed to initially is Affordable Housing Trust, I felt, had money. Why did they need more? Well, since then, they've been willing to fund 2 projects that are going to help the Housing Authority work on their expansion of Elizabeth Street. So I really do feel like we have formed a true partnership, and we're doing what the project was designed for, which is to ultimately get more housing. So I am in favor of this, and we spent a lot of time going over line by line, not saying that we might not have missed something, so if anyone else had something to add, I'm very receptive to it. But I feel it's a good project, and it just shows the true coalition between the 3 committees.
Yeah, very, very well said. I also just want to highlight, to Kathy's point, that this agreement was built off of existing agreements that other communities have between their CPC and Affordable Housing Trust. And it was also reviewed by town council as well. But are there any questions when you were reviewing this? Yeah.
I have several. In the opening paragraph, the way it's worded, we recommend to the select board. So I guess I'm making the assumption the select board can reverse. If we say yes, they can still say no, if they decide it. In effect, that the select board's going to decide if they like what we did or not. Is that a fair statement?
There are additional select board levels to this. I think, in general, anything that we put forward goes to the select board and they sign the warrant. So that happens with every single project that we do. So this really doesn't very much, we're just writing it out that they have the ability to undo. But if the select board doesn't have to sign off on everything that we propose in general.
Okay. Second question is, it refers to the project, so the project is a one-time deal?
And correct me
Every time
if
you-
I'm wrong.
Every
I'm
time
looking
you
at
have
you.
a project, we gotta fill out one
No,
of these.
this would be an annual request for money from the housing bucket to be moved to Affordable Housing Trust.
I
So
thought
yeah,
we
it's voted on.
It'd be voted on every year, approved by town meeting every
But,
year.
but you wouldn't necessarily have a project available, we're just gonna give you the money.
Yes, and if they don't have a project, there are some things in there, is if they don't use the money, it can go back. If a project comes up that we have, and now our money is in their pocket, there's a vehicle to get money back so that we can use it for a specific project that we have.
Okay,
It allows them to do things, for example, if a project came up, for Habitat for Humanity is one that comes up, that if something came up where they could buy some land, they could move quickly. So it's kind of like an emergency project that we talked about before. It gives them the money so they can move a little bit quicker. Town meeting has approved it once, the money sits in their bucket, where for us, town meeting would have to approve every single project. Where town meeting just has to approve the appropriation. Okay, they're nodding, so I'm getting it right.
page 3, top of the page H.
I've got that circled too.
I don't have page numbers.
Oh, it's up on the
H.
screen.
Item H,
H.
number 3H. It says here that if something's more than $200,000, it must be approved by both the select board and the CPC. So I guess what you're telling, again, if we give you money, let's use the Habitat for Humanity, they want to buy a piece of land, and it's $205,000, it's gonna come back to us.
Yep.
And the select board.
Yep.
But if it's $190,000, they don't have to come back to us.
Yes, because we have already, town meeting has already voted on them having $200,000 that they can spend.
But we could have given them $500,000 this year. But over 200,000, and that's basically what this group wants.
That was what some other towns have done. So we use
Okay.
that as an example.
An annual 200,000. Okay.
All right. Next item, I.
Yeah, I totally misunderstood it, apparently.
Next item, I. Annually on or before January 1st of each year, the trust shall provide a written update. What I think needs to be added there is a written update as of a certain date. In other words, we're getting an update as of January 1st. Naturally, you can't have all your records updated as of December 31st, but say November 31st, 30th. The point being is, without a specific date, you could give us something that's 9 months old and say, here's our latest update, and it could be through March, and not have current information. So I think, pick a date, a month before, 2 months before. The update should be as of, we get it on January 1st, as of November 30th, say, pick a date. Somebody should have in there.
Yeah, whatever.
6, funding.
Yep, I got that one too.
Who keeps these funds? Does the town treasurer have these funds, or is the housing trust completely separate?
I don't know.
So the trust has the funds. They'll have a separate account for this money. So it's going to be a separate account within affordable housing.
Much like
affordable
we have
housing
a
trust
separate account within the town.
for each project.
Yep.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. I don't know if it's in this paragraph. Somewhere, I think later on, basically it says interest accumulated goes to the trust. But later on, I don't remember exactly where, I believe it says, if the funds are returned, it doesn't say the interest is returned. So that should be, I think it's in the termination phase of it. Yep, shall refund, okay. All right, funding, I guess. Liability to the town. So 7, 8, and 9 are all together. It basically absolves the town of any liability in 7, 8, and 9. It does not absolve the committee of that liability. So I think you need to add the town and the committee.
There's a distinction between the town and the committee?
Yes, because right in the beginning, they identify them as 3 separate entities.
Okay.
And earlier on, they refer to town and the committee a couple times.
Yeah.
In these 3, they don't. That's the only reason. So, they identify them 3 times, and then I'll have to go back and find it. Somewhere earlier in the thing, they refer to the town and the committee.
Yeah, I'm not sure the legality of that, but we can check with town council
Yeah.
to see if.
As an example, let me give you, on the $200,000, if it has to come back, it says it has to be approved by the town, the select board, and the committee. So it refers to us both together, whereas 7, 8, 9, it doesn't list the committee. Number 11, you should have it there also, the town and the committee. Then in item 13, undistributed project funds shall be returned. We should include the interest on those funds. That's all I got.
Thank you, John. Yes, Carl.
So what, I guess the biggest thing I see here is, normally, applications would come through us, we'd review them. Eligible, get funding, approve it, move to town meeting. And it seems like what we're doing here is we're just giving housing their money each and every year without reviewing any projects unless they're over $200,000. And I don't see a problem with that, but I think that's kind of like, I don't know, a little bit of a sticking point. But it does eventually have to get approved by town meeting, just that the money goes to them each year, but not necessarily what they spend it on. I guess that's the other side, right? Today, we have some control over that, but all that money's just allocated for affordable housing trust. We can't spend it anywhere else,
And
right?
I will say too, I don't know if this is a point of concern, but there is written in here, like legally, whatever the Affordable Housing Trust spends that money on, it has to be an approved use of CPC funds. Like they can't use it on a project that wouldn't be approved.
They couldn't use it for maintenance of existing affordable housing that wasn't originally built by CPC funds. That's what as an example.
There's like specific wording of, as you all know, what CPC
Right.
funds can be used for and what they can't. And this money would have to comply with that.
I'll try to use the example. Affordable housing, somebody's pipe starts to leak, so they fix the pipe. They can't use our funds, they'd have to use other monies that they have. Because
How do we know
within the
that they're not
CPC, that's not an eligible use of funds.
I would say that we would know in our annual report that we get from them.
Okay.
So we have to trust that they do what they signed the contract and
Well,
agreed
any
to
of our
do.
projects, we have to trust that-
Exactly.
that they use the money appropriately, but
Right.
giving it kind of carte blanche every year, the 200,000 or whatever, it just sits a little uncomfortable with me as well, because it's like we've given the money that we're in charge of, but we have no control over it. So if they came with a project, $200,000 worth of project, and we said, yeah, fine, then that's what I thought this contract was, is that they brought a project to us, and then we okayed the money.
And that first application we had was exactly this. We've just written a contract around that. So again, everyone has to feel comfortable with just giving the money. I feel more comfortable now that we have a contract and agreement surrounding it, but it is the same concept of just, here's the money.
Right.
Right.
But we don't necessarily have to give them the entire 10% that we have, that we by legislation have set aside for affordable housing.
No, you don't have to, you could give them
It's got, it's
$80.
blank, but the amount is.
And it can change every year if you want it to, because it gets approved
It would
every
have
year
to
by the
change every
committee.
year, because what we have changes every year.
Exactly.
So it can be revoked, or we can go to 0.
Yes.
It's just
Yeah.
each year, one at a time, each year, we would annually, if we decided to go this route, we would annually decide what we felt was an appropriate amount. Right now in our budget, it's a little bit more, the 10% of our next budget is about $100,000. I'm sure they want all of it. Do we give them all of it?
Well, to that point, the Affordable Housing Fund, Trust Fund, isn't the only method of doing affordable housing. So if we're giving that much money to them to do whatever they want to do with it, basically, then that's taking away from the money that's in that pot that we have control over, and we're losing the interest on that, where they're gaining the interest on that money. So it's kind of, I would be more comfortable if projects came to us, we said, this is a great project, Affordable Housing Trust, you go for it. Maybe we'll give you more money than the 200,000 or whatever. I'm just uncomfortable with monies that are supposed to be in that fund being kind of expended without any parameters that we have control over. And just to clarify a couple other points, on conditions, and I guess this kind of goes for, it came up already. I was wondering, who monitors the allowable uses and the accounting and the record keeping? That's, you kind of addressed that as far as, but again, we've given the money to them, but who's accountable to report back to us as to how they've spent that money? It's kind of out there. So that was one thing. Over on funding, it was the interest section, this time scheduled to complete after receiving the funding and losing interest on that money. And then tracking. So those are the kind of issues I had, was who's accountable, and I kind of, is the same thing with all our projects. We really don't, we haven't seen a breakdown of finished projects as to how that money was spent. And was the money that we allocated for a project spent in the way we anticipated it was going to be spent? Or
Well, we
Did they-
get
you know,
broad parameters,
they-
right? A new basketball court at Dean Park, right?
Right.
But we don't know the minutia of that, right?
and should we know that?
Well, and I will say, before a project gets officially closed out, there is a form that the applicant or whoever is controlling the funds fills out, that basically will have in it, or has in it, that the controller of the funds has to give back anything that's left over
Right.
after the project. And that also is kind of the final time that we can look through what was billed to the separate account for that specific project.
Do you have?
For
those?
example, if the housing trust was to build a unit, and they put the sidewalks in front of the, but it was all part of that big package, well, the sidewalks shouldn't be included in that, right? But does it get, like, stuck in there under the rug and it gets done, or does, how does,
Yeah.
who manages all that?
So 2 points to that. The first is I would say the trust is kind of like we talked about earlier. They're required to send a report and update as to how they use the funds to the committee every year. And also, because the money that the trust gets from CPC will be in a completely separate account from all of their other funds, it will be able to track more
It's easier to
easily
track that
to
way.
make sure that those funds
Okay.
are being used strictly for projects that are CPC eligible.
Is there any time, or maybe it's not appropriate, for this body to be privy to that kind of information, just for our own satisfaction? I mean, we have to trust that and I trust that the planning department is overseeing it and they're following through, but it's almost like, now that we've had projects started and completed, it's like, was everything done
See.
copacetic?
The
Yeah,
housing
and-
trust has got nothing to do with us. They're on their own.
I know, once we give the money to them, they're on
Yeah.
there.
But you were talking about the planning board. The planning board doesn't do
No,
anything.
not planning board. The planning department oversees.
They don't oversee the trust. Nobody.
No, but
The
I-
trust oversees it.
Okay, but yeah, and that makes me uncomfortable.
I mean, there's a liaison on,
Correct.
so it's not like they're just operating at Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh,
every
God,
day.
no.
You know, like, I mean,
No, of
they're a
course-
town board.
Of course not. But remember, this money this is taxpayers' money, and
Right.
we have a responsibility to make sure that money is allocated appropriately, and we don't know, once we've given it to the trust,
Well,
whether it's being.
I think that's the reasoning behind this agreement is to really make sure that there is accountability from the trust to all of you as.
Okay.
See, item I in the conditions is exactly what you're asking for. They gotta report back to us. That's why I felt it left it open-ended. If they get a report in January 1st, but we should have information up through November 30th, not March from the previous year.
Yeah.
And then we got a 9-month gap coming out through.
Carl had a question or
First.
comment over here.
Oh, Kathy, you have some dealings with the Affordable Trust. What sizes are the projects, right? I mean, a $200,000 threshold, we might see every project they put forth, right?
I don't know that they've done any projects, and that was my reservation. They have over $1 million in their account.
Yeah.
And they hadn't done any projects, and that was my big reservation initially, is what, go spend your $1 million before you get more money. And the way a couple of people trying to explain to me, some of these projects that come up do cost more than that to be able to acquire land and to actually build something. So they're feeling they need to have more money available than just the $1 million that they have in order to be able to do something. So that's why they're asking for this. But the only thing, I shouldn't say they haven't done any. They have funded 2 housing authority things. One was a conceptual study that we did that we initially put in an eligibility request for last year for $7,000. And then they're funding 2 things, the eligibility that was submitted in May. They're funding 2 aspects of that. So I know of 2 things they've done. They've probably done some other smaller things, but they haven't done a large-scale project. And they say they haven't done a large-scale project because they don't have the funding for it.
You mentioned what I was just going to say, is that I feel this body's role with the trust would be in a supportive role in that capacity to fund things, because $200,000 isn't a heck of a lot of money when you're talking, big projects.
That's right.
It's a drop in the bucket. But it is money when it comes to conceptual plans or feasibility studies or surveys or things like that. And that's where I think we, as this body, could be used for those purposes, rather than just giving them the $200,000 and say, okay, it's in your kitty, it's kind of do what you want with it. Maybe we need to kind of gear it more towards that end of the development of a project.
So what are the drawbacks of restricting the use of money?
Would it be restricted?
So, yeah, so you're saying restrict that use to certain things, like feasibility study.
Right.
Right. But what are the drawbacks to having done that? I don't know.
I would say the drawback is timing, because I know we've run into that at the Housing Authority, is we can only come to this body, and we can come to this body anytime we want, but we only get approval from town meeting, so it makes it a little bit more fluid, and that's why they did the conceptual design for us, because otherwise we would have had to wait till November to get approval, and hopefully if we got approval, we could have done it, but we were able to do it before that. And these other two things are now, we're starting to go out to bid for two of these things, where we would have had to wait till November to get approval to go out to bid. So it does make it, we could get things done a little bit faster, and that was their initial point when they first approached me about them wanting to have the money. And I said, just come to us with a project,
Yep.
and they said, well, sometimes we
that's
don't have it. So,
Valid
you know, I'm not, I get what
That's a
everyone's
va-
saying,
no,
'cause
that's
it's
a valid
exactly how
point.
I felt 3 years ago when they came.
Kyle?
So as I look here, right, fiscal year '25, the unallocated housing money is almost $400,000, right? I mean, are they just looking for a percentage of their annual stipend, and the 400 still sits there? Or are they looking for the 400?
They're looking for some of that, I don't know, and they haven't asked exactly how much. This is just the agreement that would support whatever eligibility request they submit.
Yes.
But they are looking for some of that 400,000.
On an annual basis,
Not necessarily.
no?
That would be up to the committee.
them.
Yeah,
approve
and I wouldn't
every year.
be, I think we could revisit that every year. I don't think it needs to be an annuity.
And to Kathy's point too, this is just the agreement in terms of the restrictions about how the money can be used. But like Kathy said, the trust will still have to submit an eligibility and funding application as well that you will all be able to review and approve.
And I think the point's a good one. There are some things that have come up here that we didn't think of. So I do think it needs some tweaking, and that's why it came to this. So I don't think it's done the way it is, but
Yeah, this is just the draft, yeah.
I
John
get a
had some good
question on
things to add to it. And I saw you taking notes from that's in there. Go ahead.
a question on a specific situation. Next to Napoli's, there's some housing that I believe is low-income housing.
that's Shrewsbury Housing Authority property on Ridgeland Road.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Now, how did that come about? Just,
That
because
will-
they're asking, you know, in terms of how much it cost, et cetera, just take us through that. Somebody had to buy the land and you guys had to put the property up, or?
Yes. I was not on the Housing Authority then. I think that was built in the 80s. That's our newest property right there. 80s, 90s,
No.
90s?
Really?
I don't even think it's 10 years old.
Oh, no,
There's
it's older than that.
two real,
Well,
they're like tiny houses
Yeah,
almost.
yeah, they're a family. So whenever they were done, I was elected in 2018, so they were before 2018.
Okay. that's
Um,
probably just-
So I was not on the board at that time, but that was done through a partnership with the Department of Mental Health. And they paid a portion of it, and because of that partnership, the Housing Authority has restrictions on who can be placed in that housing, so it's not like what we have in our other facilities where you apply for housing either at the federal level through HUD or locally through the CHAMPS program. So we would like to avoid that with our Elizabeth Street project, is partnering with an organization like that, because we want that to be more family units. But that's, and there's, I can't remember how many units, there's probably 4 or 5 units there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they had to buy, that's my point, they had to buy the
We
property.
might have,
to
we
build
might
the
have
units.
owned the land, I don't know for sure. We own the land at Elizabeth Street that we're
Right.
trying to build on now.
Mhm. And there's some
Yes.
low-income
But how-
housing right up by, there's a couple units up here, right by Selco off of
Yes, Parker Road.
Parker Road.
Yep.
There's a few
We
units
have,
there.
there's, just for an overview, there's 99 units at the towers, which are federally owned units. There's 100 at Francis. There's 35 or 36 at Elizabeth Street, and the rest are scattered properties throughout town.
But that's kind of what I was getting at. Now, again, we're not gonna build another, what's the one that, off of
Francis.
Francis Gardens. Because that's 100 units, you know, unless the wards give us their property. They're in a big enough piece of property. The point being, my personal opinion, I envision these smaller units are a 6-unit, 8-unit, 10-unit apartment piece. So there will be smaller dollar value purchases, probably still more than $1 million, but not $10 million, let's say. So I think, you know, again, you get torn between, do they have to tell us everything? Do we give them, the money is theirs anyway, we can't use it for anything else.
Well,
So,
that's what I was gonna ask. What's the relationship between the housing authority and the trust? There is no.
The housing authority has no relationship with the town. We run totally independently of the town.
Okay, so if other projects were to come before this board, where would they come from?
They could come from anywhere. They could come from Affordable Housing Trust, they could come from someone who, Habitat for Humanities, they could come from somebody who just wants to build low-income housing. Doesn't have to be from the housing authority.
Okay, that was my point, that, you know, so we have to be careful how much money we give the trust, because we want to keep money for other projects that,
Right. In fact, at one time, you had talked a little bit about a project where if
Right.
there's a home in town that's deemed to be,
was multiple to begin with. You're talking about the,
or multiple, or wasn't even if it was historic, but
Oh, yeah,
someone
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
living in
yes,
it, then
yes.
there could be
it was
some.
historic, it could be, then they wanted to create, is a 2-unit home. And they wanted the preservation of it and then create
So that would be an
housing.
independent
Exactly.
homeowner that could potentially do that, so that could come from
Exactly.
anywhere.
Right,
And they could also approach the Affordable Housing Trust for that, too, so.
okay.
there-
yeah, it sounds like it's a wide open, you know,
Yeah.
stuff could come from multiple locations, so for us to try and say, let's narrow it down, and in my mind, is almost impossible, I guess, so. If I had to take a stand on this, I would say, you know, let's clean this document up, let's do it. Do we give them 200 grand next year, as opposed to the whole, with the 26 budget, it's now over 500,000, so, you know, we give them 200 grand, see how it goes. And if they don't do a good job, then sayonara. I don't know how else to do it. You gotta have some trust in them, that's my personal opinion.
Any other thoughts or comments? I think John's point of let's make some of those, see about some of those changes to those edits to the document and revisit it, and maybe we all do a little bit of thinking. I think you're right, we don't, this is just the framework of a potential agreement. They have to ask us for money. We can certainly make suggestions. I think right now we're certainly, if we're leaning towards a yes, it's not all of it, because you said there's many places where a project around affordable housing could come from. But that also buys us some time, another month to think about it too, and think of more questions. I'm sure that Kathy, as a member of the committee that hammered out this agreement, if you have a question, she'd be happy to try to answer it or point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a note on that in terms of what comes next. So we're running the same comment process at the Affordable Housing Trust meeting on Thursday. So they'll also be able to give comments or anything, they feel should be edited in the agreement. And once both committees and groups are satisfied with the agreement, we recommend it to the joint committee, who will then finalize and sign that together. Just a note on the process.
Sounds good. So the next, if there's nothing more about that agreement, the next action item is to review and approve our 2026 CPC meeting schedule. I feel like this one we might get through and we don't have to table till August.
Yeah.
Maybe, hopefully. That's also in the drive, but it's proposing meeting dates of August 4th, starting early, that we could do it as a CPC application workshop. I wonder if that should be pushed off since we don't have the application complete. Perhaps it could be the September meeting instead. And certainly in the meantime, if there's anyone at home or anyone that watches this later that has an idea, go ahead. Those current eligibility application format is still valid, and we can ask us the same question with that form or anything to come. Don't wait. But the meetings suggested are August 4th, September 8th, October 6th, November 3rd, December 1st, January 5th, and have public hearings at that time, February 2nd, March 2nd, April 6th, and use that as our annual community forum, May 11th, and June 1st. Any edits, comments?
Well, you say in January you're having a public hearing. Is that basically like, why are we having a public meeting, only that one?
It was suggested by the planning department that if we had applications at that time that we were considering, if we were in the process of considering funding requests, that we can invite them all to that meeting. That would give us a lot of time between then and the May town
For the
meeting.
Maytown meeting. But
Yes.
that goes back to timelines in the Maytown meeting, as opposed to if somebody has a request later on, theoretically, on the schedule, we're setting this one up, but we could have a public meeting anytime.
We can, but to have a public meeting, we have to advertise it how far in
Right.
advance?
No, I understand that.
Yeah, just, this covers us a little bit if we haven't, we can certainly have more. This is not the only one. But if we have applications to consider, we could certainly have more.
Will there be one for the fall town meeting?
So, just a note on this timeline specifically in January for the public hearings. This was reflective of the deadline schedule that is in the CPC plan that we voted on earlier. So if there's a change in what the committee wants to do, then obviously we can change the date for the public hearings if necessary.
I'm okay with leaving it, my only concern was, this is the only time in the entire year
No.
that we could have public hearings, some other time if something else comes up.
Maybe if someone saw it in print, it would spur them
Yeah.
to get in line earlier, hopefully.
Yeah.
But we can schedule one at a time, and we know sometimes we have them and no one comes. But maybe if there's one people can plan around or think about, we'll have folks come.
And the main public hearing for fall town meeting isn't listed here because these dates end at the end of the fiscal year, which is next June. And according to the timeline in the plan, that public hearing would be, I forget if it was July or August, but it would be in a date that is in the next fiscal year. So it isn't in this schedule. But it exists.
Yeah.
theoretically.
We don't currently have any applications to consider for the fall town meeting, but if we get them. Okay. Are there any thoughts, or are we willing to make a motion to accept this as our calendar? We can always change, things happen, we change dates moving forward if need be. Is there a motion
I'll
to
make a
accept
motion
this
to
calendar?
accept the calendar
Second.
as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So this will be our calendar to start with for the year. I think we've next discussed all the discussion items we can possibly discuss today, unless there's something else anyone has on their mind or would like to see on our August agenda.
Just a continuation of publicity. I think now that there's projects finished, that it was great to see the ribbon cutting on the parking lot and
Oh,
stuff like
yes,
that.
that was fun.
Social media, so whenever we can get that out there into the public.
And was that announced before to this committee? Because I would have gone if I'd known about it.
No, I think it was just the trail, was it
It was the Trails Committee that did it.
Okay.
We just
Trails Committee
winged
did
it,
it.
you know? We looked at it and said, well, we should have somebody from the Commission on Disability there and somebody from the Select Board. And it was just thrown together at the last minute, really. Seriously, at the last minute, because the person who was going to cut the ribbon wasn't there. And so we found another little Girl Scout who was there, bless her heart, and who rose to the occasion. So,
Just- Yeah, just as a point of information for everybody, I had something going, I couldn't go to the ribbon cutting, which I wanted to. But my wife and I, we drove up there literally about 3 hours later.
Mhm.
So no one was there, and I'm sure Parks and Recs had to pick it up. The big black trash bags that you would have, there was a big black trash bag sitting there next to the trash can. And I went and looked at it, and it was 3/4 full of old paint cans,
No.
spray,
Really?
like Krylon spray cans. It was just full of,
Oh, you know what? I wonder
Trash.
if that,
They
you
did a
know, there's
cleanup,
an
maybe?
old building at the top of the hill,
yeah.
and certain people go there to express their artistic
Somebody
impulses.
must have emptied all their cans there.
And I would not be surprised if somebody who saw that found a trash bag and just filled it
Cleaned
up
it
and
up.
took it down there.
Probably.
So,
Yeah.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe I
know,
hadn't thought
That's
about that.
probably what happened. It was all to the good.
I don't think that's a unique event. About a month ago, or less, I was at Jordan Pond because I'm on the Conservation Commission, and I was just walking it because we're dealing with it right now, right?
Mhm.
And when I got back to my car, there was a very nice, wonderful gentleman from the town who was emptying the trash. And I said, "Thank you." And he said, "You're welcome." And we had this conversation in which he told me that the amount of trash is just incredible. Much of it could be recycled, he said, but it doesn't matter because people have thrown it in there, and there's all sorts of stuff that's in there, and that basically his primary job
Oh, my
is
God.
going from one Shrewsbury park to the next and picking up the unbelievable amounts of trash that people bring.
It's not the trash from there, it's houses, the Glavit Fields have the same problem. as
Exactly.
Shrewsbury Soccer.
That's what he was saying.
It's bad enough, the people who give their kids just single-use bottles, and
Right.
they throw them everywhere. Visiting certain towns, I won't mention,
Computers, all
are
sorts
really
of stuff.
bad.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we had mattresses there,
Oh, geez.
microwave,
Oh, no.
and
Yeah.
it's Glavin,
It's
so
basically
Shrewsbury
stuff that
Soccer
can't
has to
be
figure out
recycled.
what to do with it.
Yeah.
Right, it's
Lake
not a
Street
unique
Park has a
event.
lot of problems with that.
Yeah.
My daughter and I, we cleaned up on the, I don't know, at that town cleanup day, her and I did that Jordan Pond Trail.
Mm.
So, and then we went up to the fence line and back down, yeah, found all kinds of stuff. Mainly just bottles.
Mainly just bottles,
Yeah.
but right there at the trash can. People
Yeah.
will simply bring it there because they don't want to buy the extra huge bag to put it in, or
That
Go to
just
the
went
trail.
up in price,
they did.
yeah.
You know, the Trails Committee just heard a scout come to us with a request for a trash bin at a trailhead at the high school, because she said there was a lot of trash there, and indeed there is. And so the Parks Department is going to put a trash can there and collect the trash. So, you know, I guess it's a good idea. I hope it's not a tremendous burden for the Parks Department, but, you know, it's better than
Sometimes
having
it
trash out there.
attracts things, but
Yeah.
it's probably not a problem that the Community Preservation Commission can solve, and certainly not today.
No,
So,
it's a
Is
human
there-
problem.
it is, it's sad. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That adjourns our July 7th meeting. We will see you all on August 4th.